I would like to request Mr. Sanjay Jesrani, the CEO Go North Ventures, to kindly come on stage to take over the session.
Thank you, Annie, and a big hello to all the members here. I think it's been a wonderful morning. I've been thoroughly enjoying myself. In fact, I had a chance to interact with Mr. Deshpande yesterday, Mr. Deshpande and Raju. And I'm always inspired when I come here to Nizamabad and look at the excellent work which is happening at Kakatiya Sandbox. Just to give you a quick background, I had the good fortune of being in Raju's team for almost 17 years at Sierra Atlantic. Thoroughly enjoyed the journey. I watched him closely, and I'm a great beneficiary of a startup which finally made it big. So it's my pleasure. Let me invite my panel, Mr. Ajit Rangnekar, Mr. Dr. Deshdeep, Dr. Radhika, Shankar, and Mr. Murali. May I request all my panel members to come onto the stage, please. We'll have an interesting session, I'm sure. There's so much discussion around startups which is happening, I think, over the last 2 years. The entire press continues to talk about startups. I think now the government itself, right from Prime Minister Modi, is talking about startups, Stand Up India, Startup India. In fact, the most interesting thing is Mr. Ratan Tata is now one of the most prolific startup investors in India today. So it's really wonderful to see the amount of action which is happening around startups. So I think one aspect we clearly have is that it's been mostly the urban India which has benefited from the huge vibrancy in startups. But I think it's time to look at how we can enable rural startups. That's really the theme today. The conference theme today, as we all know, is executing locally and innovating globally. I think rural startups are going to weave in excellently with that theme, and I look forward to an engaging discussion with my team here. So let me start off with introducing each of my panel members. I have Dr. Deshdeep Sahdev. He is a theoretical high-energy physicist whose chief interest lies in cosmology. Interesting. After obtaining his PhD from Case Western, he has carried out postdoctoral research at Cornell and University of Penn and at the TIFR. Welcome, Dr. Deshdeep. I hope we'll have an engaging discussion. I have Dean Ajit Rangnekar. He was formerly the dean at ISB, which is one of the most prestigious academic institutions in India, and one of the showcases of Telangana. I'm sure IT Secretary Jayesh Ranjan will agree with me on that. I think he's done human service for the institution and for the state, and it's been a wonderful journey for Ajit. He was formerly country head at Price Waterhouse, and he has an enormous amount of global experience which he brings to the table and to the panel here today. I also have Dr. Radhika Shankar. Welcome, Doctor. Professor Radhika is a certified trainer, mentor, and consultant for MSMEs. So she is very well qualified to be on the panel here today. And she has conducted several training programs across both in India and globally. And she'll add a lot of value here today. And finally, let me introduce Murali Vullaganti. Murali is the chief architect and founder CEO of a very interesting company called RuralShores Business Services. Actually, he's definitely enriching the panel because he has an enormous amount of experience in building rural BPOs and KPOs. Murali's company employs over 4,000 people across 8 states in India, and he's really been one of the leaders on a national level in bridging the gap, right? So the whole technology services market, which I was also a part of, while it enormously benefited brand India, it disproportionately benefited urban India. So I think I'm very keen to hear from Murali also about his experience out of RuralShores. And with that, let me kick off the topic here. So we spoke about how the startups, how the vibrancy which is being created with the enormous interest in startups. Desh earlier spoke about needing to create 1 million entrepreneurs, and one definitely looks at that. How do you create 1 million entrepreneurs when you have over 70% of the Indian population in rural India? So I think it's long overdue that we have a strong movement to create rural startups, and today's panel is really going to deliberate that. So let me quickly get started. I'll request Ajit to start off the topic. Would you like to, Ajit, please? Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Sanjay. First of all, let me congratulate Raju and the team. This has been an amazing experience so far, and to see the young people here in Nizamabad doing such wonderful things is really heartwarming for many of us. Early this morning, Shankar talked about the freedom to dream, and I want all of us to think about this a little. How many of these young children in rural India have that freedom to dream? How many of them really have the opportunity, like our children, to sit, to envisage, to think, and not worry about the day-to-day existence? In how many schools in rural India do we encourage people to be curious? Do we encourage people to play with their hands, to do things? And if we don't do that all the way from rural schooling, what hope do we have of converting them into great thinkers and entrepreneurs? So I think this is one thing that we have to hit at the root cause and really try and see if we can transform some of the school education to make our children more curious, more acceptable to trying, failing, doing things. Fortunately, in spite of that handicap, a large number of our young students are still highly innovative, highly thoughtful, and highly creative. So a couple of years ago, we at ISB, together with both the Telangana and the AP government, started Technology Entrepreneurship Program. And for those of you who I'm sure are going to ask me, why did you restrict it to technology and not take it to others? This is just the first stage. Technology simply because there was something like 2.5 lakh students graduating from these institutions in this state. And many of them were claimed to be not job worthy. And we said, no, let's make them entrepreneurs so that they give jobs rather than ask for jobs. And we started this program to get them to think about what are some of the things that affect you in your workplace. What if there is an idea, how do you envisage it? How do you take that idea to what is the business model for it? What is the market for it? How do you develop it? What is design thinking? How do you make it beautiful? How do you make it usable? The first grad of 800 just graduated a few months ago. The next batch will be 2,000. In another 2 to 3 years, we hope to hit at least 10,000 students. My dream is to see at least 1 lakh rural young people go through this program and do things. What was even more exciting was to see the kind of products that they are already developing. It's absolutely fascinating to see the quality of thinking and the quality of capability. However, there are some challenges, and that's where all of us working together have to sort this out. First thing is that the educational support within the rural engineering colleges is somewhat low. The faculty either has no interest or has no capability to help. They also do not have the kind of equipment they should have. The engineering staff college in Hyderabad, hardly 2-3 kilometers from ISB, has every conceivable 3D printer you can think of. But what do I do in Nizamabad? How does a young person actually play with things and create things? How do we continue to give them ongoing support? How do we continue to find funders for them? How do we continue to find mentors for them? But what little we have seen, there is an enormous potential to do some seriously socially responsible products in the rural country. I think what is really lacking is our support to them, not their effort.
Thanks, Ajit, and I really appreciate what you mentioned. And it's clear that we need a lot more of organizations like the Deshpande Foundation and the Sandbox, which can really generate that sort of momentum and energy. And we need a lot of inputs from the government. And I'm sure that's going to happen. And you need that sort of enabling system, which, like Jayesh mentioned, can be the receiving mechanism. So that's really going to be key. Let me now throw a question to Dr. Radhika. Doctor, I know you do work very closely with MSMEs and you have conducted several programs all across India. What do you think can be really done to stimulate that sort of energy which is required to inspire a lot more youngsters from rural India to start taking up entrepreneurship, Doctor?
Thank you, Sanjay, and thank you, Sandbox, for inviting me. I would first look at the rural startup and maybe look at the biggest problems that are there, and I could put it down to 3 C's, right? So the first C is connectivity. Whether it's a connectivity to internet or connectivity to the roads or connectivity to the culture, connectivity between people, that is the first problem. And second is, of course, the customer. For any startup, customers play a very important role. So the customer acquisition is another very important aspect. So whether we're looking at customers in the rural area or we're looking at customers, a rural startup looking for customers across the world, what will be the way and how acquire customers. And third, but not the least, is credit. Because all said and done, there's still a lot of credit problems, financial problems, whether it's through CSR funds or whether it is through self-generated hybrid model funds, or whether it's through pure donations and charity. I think these are the 3 big problems, and in these 3 big problems lie the biggest opportunity for the rurals to start. So I would then say the answer to this, I mean, I'm not giving you a wholesome answer, but then again I could say for these 3 C's, I would put up a my forward, my solution in a very short form, and that's a KISS, K-I-S-S. So K is for knowledge, and that's where we're talking about, and the sphere that I'm working in, which is knowledge and skills. Whether it is imparting soft skills, technical skills, or entrepreneurial skills, I think there's a lot more to be done in rural areas. And one of the ways is education, as Sir also rightly put it. So this sphere needs to be really concentrated on looking at online MOOCs that can reach. Now for that, the connectivity of internet or an ICT platform needs to be done. And if you look at learning from your peers, that happens a lot in entrepreneurs. Peer learning is something which we have to. So where do these rural entrepreneurs look? Though by nature, agriculture and agripreneurs in your rural areas, I would definitely say latent entrepreneurship is present, dormant in some. So that needs to be awoken up only through skills, knowledge, dissemination through peer learning. So I would like in Coimbatore, they're doing a bus where they're showcasing best startups in all rural areas, mobile exhibitions of rural startups, going to all rural areas. These are some of the things that people are doing in order to show so that they can have benchmarks to learn from and give them the right exposure. The I stands for, of course, infrastructure. Long has been talked about the connectivities. So I'm not going to talk about infrastructure much. The next 2 S's are support systems to the eco. whether it is the support system from private or support system from the government. When you're looking at support ecosystems, mentoring, legal and accounting services, the tertiary services that are required for rural entrepreneurs to enable their startup and work, very, very important. The incubator can give some, but I think the other areas, again, I look these as opportunities where tertiary service startups can start in these rural areas. Last but not the least, the government support which they've been talking about, whether it is through central government or through state government, I think that plays a very important role. And again, that shouldn't lull the group, into a complacency, which I do notice in MSME that it has to come. But I think with the startup energy, they should be able to overcome without the government support, and the government support should be more a background. So if you look at the startup village entrepreneurship program started by the central government, which is looking at 52 blocks in our country as a pilot program, I think that model seems to be a very trust model, and that can be also looked at. So 3C challenges with a kiss, I think it throws a lot of enabling startups.
Thank you, Dr. Radhika. That was extremely well put, and I totally agree. I think there are several aspects which can really spark off that sort of momentum. I think there are definitely many institutions which most urban startups have the benefit of. Institutions like TAI and several other angel networks, which I think is going to be important to start having them to penetrate into rural India, because there are huge markets out there. I think even as role models and inspirations, we actually have 3 of them in the room today and many more. Desh himself, Raju and Funny, people who have created enormous amount of wealth in a first generation, and excellent role models. In fact, I'm always fascinated by the China story also. If you look at Alibaba, Jack Ma, basically a teacher from rural part of China, and now one of the wealthiest people in the world, and the amount of wealth which has been created. So I think there are interesting inspirations to be taken. But let me throw a question at Dr. Deshdeep Sahdev. Doctor, I think you have a very eclectic background. I would love to have your views on what can be done to spark a lot of momentum in enabling startups in rural India.
Good afternoon. Myself right now an entrepreneur. But when I was being introduced, there was one important thing which was left out. I have been teaching in IIT Kanpur for 26 years. I've just recently left IIT Kanpur and gotten full time into entrepreneurship. I was the most unlikely entrepreneur. I was academically inclined. I was into theoretical physics. So I will just describe to you how I got into entrepreneurship and precisely what it is, what the product is, and why it is relevant both to the urban areas and the rural areas. As I told you, when I joined IIT Kanpur as a physicist, I was purely into theoretical work. I saw a lot of engineers around me, and I just assumed that they would be able to fix all sorts of things. Now, once there was a power failure on our campus, which lasted for 5 days, and this was in the middle of August. It was completely dark. We were sweltering in the heat, and so I just decided that I would try to figure out how to fix the problem. And the first thing I did was to go up to the tallest building on campus and look around to see how widespread this power failure was. And to my utter amazement, I found that there was light all around, and it was only darkness. So I said, oh, this is fantastic. I just walked up to my neighbor who was a senior professor in electrical engineering, and I just excitedly told him that, wow, you know, the problem is just local, let's just go out and fix it, and we'll have electricity very soon. And the answer he gave me just stunned me completely. He says, do you expect me to be preparing my lectures or to be fixing electrical faults? And I said, wait, why are the two different? Why would an electrical engineer not be able to fix electrical faults? And he says, well, you know nothing about engineering, you're only a theoretical physicist. So please spare me. I mean, go and learn something about engineering before making these kinds of absurd statements. That's when I started realizing that there were different types of education. And the big problem in all developing areas, whether they're rural or they're areas like the urban areas of India, there is an education which links you up to the market, which is the global market, which is elsewhere by and large. And your immediate surroundings and problems that arise out of your immediate surroundings. The two types of educations, the ones that allow you to solve your immediate problems, may or may not be relevant to the global markets. And there I could see the dilemma in each one of my students. So the brand that we did start pushing was the one related to the immediate surroundings. And we tried building up. And in fact, the whole company that I've built is centered around building up that brand of education. And we, of course, have to market it. We have to convince our best people to educate themselves to tackle the immediate problems. Now, I'm seeing a bit of it here where people are looking at the local market as an indication of what is in immediate demand in your immediate vicinity and trying to tackle it that way. And I mean, I'm just studying this particular model also with some interest, but it's very different from the type of product, the educational product that we've been developing over the last several years, both in the social arena and in the company that I founded, which is a high-tech engineering company, but where we're doing everything locally.
Thank you, Doctor. That's a very interesting perspective. And I think it reminds me of something which Desh mentioned, that one of the objectives of the entire sandbox model is to transform people from complainers to problem solvers. And I think that's exactly the model of education which is required. You know, one of the things one always looks at from a rural startup perspective is that if we can attract enough amount of risk-open investors to come in and invest in rural startups, the ROI I think can be phenomenal. It's a financial ROI, there is a social ROI, there is an enormous satisfaction which can be generated. And for all early stage investors, it's really, you know, early stage investment is about nurture capital. So I would definitely, I have a lot of my investor friends in this hall here, and one would always like to encourage, investors and organizations which are built around encouraging investors to reach out and to take interest in many more rural startups also. Let me now move over to my friend Murali here on the panel. I think among us he's probably the best qualified. He's had feet on the ground, after a fantastic career working out of the US, leading very large multinational companies. He chose to set up RuralShores with exactly this purpose. I think he's closest to acting on enabling rural entrepreneurship, enabling rural employment. Murali, I would love to hear your view on what are those factors you feel which can really be pumped up to generate that form of rural entrepreneurship and to build say a 200,000 rural startups over the next 5 to 10 years? Yeah?
So first let me give you a gist of the intervention we are trying to make in the rural India. This organization is a social enterprise focused on providing employment opportunities by bringing the IT and BPO jobs to rural India by setting up micro centers in these places. Each center is employs about 200 to 300 rural youth with educational qualification of 12th standard or a degree. And so we have today 18 centers spread across 8 states, employing more than 4,000 people. Now that's just in a gist of what we do. Now the enablers, how this is actually enabling, this is not on one side we are providing employment, but how is enabling the rural startups? When we set up a new center in a village, a small town or a large village, generally in the first year around that center there's nothing exists except that center and the people coming in by bus, commuting to the center by bus or shared auto or down. 1 year later what you end up seeing is a lot of shops coming around that center. It could be mobile recharge or first of all you see the lot of scooters and motorcycles parked in the center. So and then there's a lot of shops coming around in that. So what is it creating is creating an ecosystem to enable the people in the rural area to be entrepreneurs and create their own business. And with this business, these 200-300 people that are working there, they have a sustainable monthly consumable income coming into them. It's almost about 3 crores annually, and that's in that complex of 12 to 15 villages. So now they have the disposable income, they're spending it, so that's nurturing the entrepreneurship and creating the new startups and new business. And also the people who are working in the centers after 2 years or 3 years, having achieved some self-sustainability and financial stability, they start thinking of doing something in their own community by creating a new, looking at their problems and trying to solve the problems through some entrepreneurship. So this is you basically need to look at ways, not just providing employment or what you want to do. Also, how do you expand that to really be enabler to or a change maker to enable the people to actually start engaging in the communities and do more in their own communities. These people have latent the skills and the talent. They don't know that. So they need to bring that out from them. Once you do that and they have the confidence, self-confidence and feel empowered, there's no limit. The sky is the limit.
Thank you, Murali. That was really very helpful. And before I throw open the floor to questions, I just wanted to mention, I have had the good fortune of investing in a rural startup. It's a company called In3 out of Chennai, which wanted to become the Amazon of rural South India. They're basically in the white good and aspirational good space, and built by a founding team with over 25 years each of rural South India experience from the Shriram Group and the TVS Group. And I really like the clarity with which they built the company. This company was focused on selling to a rural purchasing market which had aspirational purchasing requirements, white goods, televisions, refrigerators and a bunch of high-end goods. They partnered with India Post as the logistics partner. They partnered with several of the microfinance organizations from a funding and EMI perspective, and they have built a very successful company. So I just want to leave that as a thought to many of the entrepreneurs who are here, who are thinking of rural startups. They can be very interesting partnering opportunities with startups in urban India. Rural India is a serious market. Everybody recognizes that, and people will always move to where they can get business. So there's no question. But with that, I want to throw open the floor to 2 to 3 questions. Any questions, please? Yeah, can I have the mic to the lady here? Yeah, Annie, we'll just take another 5 minutes, so appreciate it.
My question is to Mr. Murali. You mentioned that you're doing rural startup, rural BPOs, micro centers. Could you elaborate a bit more as to how does it happen? Is it a training center for rural India, or do you take on business and then set it up? How does it work? Because it's a very interesting concept. And which states are you in? Thanks.
See, to make it successful, any center, the critical part is having the sustainable process work, business coming into that center and engage and gainfully employ these people, right? So initially when we started off, we went ahead and set up the first few centers, 3-4 centers, and we taken some work and showcased that this, when we started the training, building the team, and then went up to the business, got some here and there. But now we reached a point where, in order to scale, by the way, our vision is to have one center in each rural districts in the country. That means 500 centers across the country, each employing an average 200. That means providing jobs for 1 lakh. Now, in order for us to now grow, getting the work becoming the presidents, we kind of mastered the model. And when we started off, we didn't know how to start, whether these people can really do complex business processes, logging directly to the client end systems, remotely, whether it's in the US or Mumbai. So we kind of now perfected the model. We know how to do it. It is now a question of getting the work. Once we have work coming in, then we set up the center, and we know the time it takes to incubate and operationalize that place. And so it's now a question of getting more and more work to scale. Today we are in 8 states, 3 in South, Andhra, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. And then we have Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, UP, Rajasthan and Gujarat.
Any other questions, please? Yeah, we have a question here. Can you just pass the mic, gentlemen? Yeah, Manohar.
This question is for Mr. Murali from RuralShores. So what is the minimum number of people that you would look for to set up a rural offshore facility? One. Second, what are the criteria for you to set up that center? And another thing, I have actually set up a rural empowerment center in my district, Kadapa district in Jammu and Madhur. And if I provide you all the facility, the infrastructure, as well as even the beneficiaries or the employees trained, because we do the training of the local talent. So if I provide you all of that, can you come and set up a center?
To the first question, we need about minimum 100 to 150 people worth of work coming in there. That gives us the right size of scale of economics there, because each center has to be profitable. As I said, we are a social enterprise, which means the profits being the purpose. Okay? So in order to make that center sustainable, not day one, it takes about a year to become sustainable. We need about 150 people for the process, ongoing, not projects, ongoing process. Now that is the size, which means we generally go about 150 seats, and then generally we run 2 shifts, so it goes to 250 to 300 people. Now to set up a center, the key is the infrastructure, power and connectivity. Connectivity is the most important. Power you can always find with alternate solutions. We are now running some centers, some solar, some place you have to have backup gensets and all of that. Whereas the connectivity, you got to have the ISPs who will provide, continue either it's fiber based or radio frequency based connectivity. Generally we need about 10 Mbps, and we generally go with 2 service providers. So even one goes down, the other is available. So these 2 are the key ones, and people, we don't expect any talent, any skilled people. We We know we got to train them, their raw material, we need to polish them. So that is our IP, how to take the rustic youth and transform them into knowledge professionals through a journey of 6 months to 9 months. So that is our responsibility.
Thank you, Murali, and I have a 0-minute signal now. So if there are any more questions, you can please engage with my fellow panelists over lunch. So with that, I would just like to summarize. I think we have great opportunity in, looking forward to a lot more action on rural startups. I think it was a very engaging discussion. I would like to thank all my fellow panelists for their excellent contribution, and I hand back to Annie. Thank you.